What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another Swift video. In today's video, we're going to be learning how to build something that looks like the settings app. So we are going to build the screen that you see here. It looks really nice in light mode and dark mode. We're going to look at setting up these custom cells, the section titles, the switch, how to configure it with a model, all that good stuff. So this type of screen is fairly common, not only in settings, but in any type of app, a tab that has some information, maybe terms of service, or maybe some in-app purchases, some type of settings within your own app. So that all said, I'm going to be annoying and say absolutely destroy the like button. Helps out the videos quite a bit. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe for Swift, iOS, Objective-C, Swift UI content. I post almost daily. And that all said, get Xcode ready, get excited. Let's talk about how to build this. All right, we're going to get started by opening up Xcode and creating a new project. We're going to stick with the app template, and I'm going to go ahead and call this the settings app. Make sure your language, of course, is Swift and your interface is storyboard, lifecycle UI kit. Go ahead and continue. We'll save it to our desktop. And let's go ahead and expand this window to give ourselves some more room to work. And we're going to jump into the view controller so we can begin building out our screen, which is going to consist of a table view. So before we add custom cells, we're going to want to add a simple table view on here. So let's go ahead and create it. We're going to create it with this anonymous closure pattern. So we're going to say table view, UI table view. We're going to add the parentheses here. So it's a constructor. And the type of table view we want is a table view with a style of grouped. So we're going to say frame is 0 by default, and the style is grouped. And this will apply the styling in which you see most of the system table views in the iOS operating system, specifically in the settings app. So we're going to start by registering just a very basic cell. We're going to be adding our custom cells, but just for the sake of making sure our table is working, go ahead and register that. We're also going to say here title is going to be settings. We are going to add a subview of the table view. We're going to assign its delegate, and we are going to assign its data source. And of course, we don't want to forget to assign its frame. Oops, view.bounds, what we're looking for. There we go. We want to make sure we conform to the table view delegate appear as well as the table view data source. Looking good. We want to add the two functions that are required by the table. So number of rows, we're just going to return 0 for now. And we also want cell for row, add index path. And here we want to dequeue a cell. So we're going to say cell is table view, dequeue reusable cell with identifier and index path. The ID is cell, since that's what we registered. The 4 is going to be index path. Here you can simply return cell, and just for the sake of making sure the table works, let's go ahead and set a label text on it. And we're just going to say hello world. And this should be sufficient to get a table showing up, but we're going to take it one step further before we run it for the first time. We're going to talk about how to set up our models. So our model needs to consist of two things, essentially. The UI aspects of how to render the cell, and then the handler itself. So if we think about that, let's create a struct, and let's go ahead and call this settings option. And we can say it has a title on it. We can say it has a handler on it, which is a closure. And in our settings cell, we also want a icon image. So we're going to want a UI image. So we're going to say an icon is going to be UI image. And I'm going to make it optional because the constructor of a UI image returns optional. And we also want an icon background color. So if you've seen the settings app before, you'll have noticed that the icon is always in a rounded cornered square. And we're going to actually create that programmatically. It's not going to be a part of the image. So go ahead and add that as well. And now what we want to do here is create an array of models. We're going to make it a var so it's mutable. And this is going to be setting option, just like that. And now here, a number of rows, we can say this is going to be models.count. And here we can get the model out of that array by saying indexPath.row. And then instead of assigning this text here, we can say model.title. And most importantly, we want to assign some models. So let's go ahead and create a function and call it configure, call it up here view to load. We're going to add that function right here. And I'm going to simply go ahead and say self.models is going to be an array of our setting option. And let's just go ahead and create these. So I'm going to say, let's actually be lazy firstly, just the way we want to do this. And let's say this equals array of 0 to 100. And we're going to compact map this to be a settings option. And the title is going to be item, the given number. The icon, let's go ahead and say is UI image, system image of, I believe house is one of the images. The background color, we're going to say system pink. And the handler, we'll just leave empty like that. And we should have models now being created. So let's go ahead and pick a simulator and run it and see where we're at. So let's pick the 12 Pro Max since I've got it booted already. Hit that play button. Xcode should be building. Hopefully we have no errors. And we should have a table view showing up already. Now we won't have an image, but we should definitely have the table view. All right, looking good. So let's go ahead and create our first custom cell. Then we'll talk about separating everything out into their own sections with titles. So our cell needs to have an image view and a label. So let me first create a new file here. This is going to be a Cocoa Touch class, and we want a subclass UI table view cell, just like that. And here I'm going to call this setting table view cell. Make sure it's Swift and make sure the nib file is unchecked. Go ahead and create it, and start by getting rid of all the stuff in here that Xcode gives us as a template. Let's go ahead and add a identifier as the name of the class. We want to override the initializer with a style and reuse identifier. We want to make sure we call super on it with the same parameters. And we also need the required initializer, just like that. We're also going to want to lay out subviews and call super layout subviews. And finally, we're going to want prepare for reuse and also call its super method. So prepare for reuse. Let's add our subviews in here. So we're going to want to say we want a image view. So we're going to say image view is a hue. Let's actually call this icon image view to be a little more specific. But this is going to be a UI image view. And this is going to be fairly simple, standard image view. UI image view, go ahead and return it here. We're also going to set the tint color on this guy to be white, and we're also going to set its content mode to be scale aspect fit. Now, because we want the image to be in a square with rounded corners, we're going to want a container. And all the container is going to be is a UI view. So I'm going to say here icon container. And this is going to be a UI view like that. And this is, once again, just a very bare bones UI view. And this is going to contain the icon inside of it. And we can apply the background color to this. We are going to want to say here, clips to bounds true. And we're going to round the corners on it so we get that really polished look that Apple has in their own settings app, as well as their other table view based first-party apps. I'm also going to say masks to bounds. So for those of you who aren't aware, clips to bounds and masks to bounds are very similar. This one applies to the frame of the view. This one applies to the layer of the view. Slight difference there. I won't go too deep into that, but I always have a habit to have both of them. But anyways, moving along. So we've got the container, and the last subview that we want is the label view. So I'm going to go ahead, and once I can spell private correctly, there we go. We're going to call this the label, like that. We're going to say label here. We're going to say label, whoops. We're going to say label, number of lines is going to be 1. We're going to return the label. And I believe that should be sufficient. We're not going to change the font or anything. So now in the constructor, we want to add all these as subviews to the content view. content view, we want to add subviews for the label, the icon image view, and the icon container. We also want to say content view clips to bounds is true. And we also want that little arrow on the right, which is an accessory type. And we're going to go ahead and set this equal to be a disclosure indicator. I always forget which one it is. I believe it's the one without detail, but we'll find out if I was right. Then we want to implement the layout as well as the prepare for reuse. So this one's easy. This function gets called whenever the table view tries to reuse a cell. So what you really want to do is just reset everything because we're going to configure a new cell. So we're going to reset the image, the text itself, and the icon container background color, because that's what we're going to configure. Now keep in mind, you don't want to remove the sub view here from the actual cell, because when it's reused, when the cell is reused, it doesn't call the initializer again. It basically takes a prior initialized cell and it just tries to configure it again. So you just want to reset the actual visual properties. Now, before we do layout, we're going to want a way to configure the cell, and that's where our model comes into play. So we're going to say configure with model, and this is going to be settings option. And this is going to be fairly simple. So we're going to say label.text is going to be model.title. We're going to say icon image view dot image is going to be model.image. Here we're going to say icon container. Whoops, that's not what we want. Icon container background color is going to be model dot icon background color. So last up, we want to do the layout, and then we're going to go use this cell and make sure it all looks good. So the first thing we want to do is determine the size of our icon container. So let's see, our icon container is going to be a square. So we're going to say size is going to be content view dot height, rather dot frame dot size dot height. And let's say we subtract 12, so 6 from the top and 6 from the bottom. And now what we can say here is the icon container frame is a CG rect, and let's give it 10 from the left, and we're going to say 6 from the top, and then this is going to be size, and this is going to be size. Just make sure you explicitly say this is a CG float, otherwise you're going to get an error. Now, one thing we actually screwed up a little bit here is we want to first add the icon container here, and we want to add the image view into the icon container instead of the content view. So make sure you go ahead and flip that. I just realized the mistake on my part. And let's continue along here. Now what we're going to say for the image size, this is going to be size over 1.5. So we're just going to make it smaller. And we're going to go ahead and say the icon image view frame is going to be CG rect 0, 0, and this is going to be image size. Whoops, image size. This will also be image size. Once again, make sure this is a CG float. And we want the actual image to be centered in the container. So here we're going to say the image views center is going to be the containers center. Bear with me, almost done. Last up, we want to do the label. So we're going to say the labels frame is CG rect. We want X, Y, width, and height. So the Y will be 0. Width is simple too. We're going to do content view with subtracting 10, rather 15, because 10 from the left of the icon container, and then 5-point buffer. And then we also want to subtract the width of the icon container. So we're going to say subtracting the icon container frame size width, and subtract 10 from the right side of the cell. The height is going to be content view frame size height. And let's see, what did we miss here? So we need the X. So let's go ahead and put these on new lines so they're more legible. And the X here is going to be 15 plus the width of the icon container. So we're going to say icon container frame size width, just like that. Hopefully I didn't screw up that little calculation there. We'll find out in just a second. Let's see, let's just read it. It looks like something's not happy because it's not highlighting in the proper color. So let's go ahead and hit Command B. Let's see if we have any errors here. Sometimes Xcode just loves to not be helpful. All right, looks like it's building. Let's go ahead and hit that run button. And let's see if we're in business. I have a feeling we have an error somewhere. All right, looks like we do have an error. Let's see what happened. Okay, so we've got 0 here, icon container, frame size width. Let's see what the problem is. Value of type CGRect does not have. So I definitely spelt something wrong here. Let's try that one more time. Icon container, frame size width. And here we're going to say content view, frame size, height. So the simplest solution, what I've always found, is let's just type this again. So make our lives easier and waste less time. So let's just go 0, 0, 0, and let's see if that makes it happy. All right, let's put in our values. We break these onto new lines. Let's do this calculation again. So the height is going to be content view frame size height. All right, looking good. Whoops. The y is going to be 0, looking good. This is going to be 15 plus the icon containers frame size width, looking good. And then the width here is going to be the entire width of the content view. And we're going to subtract 15, and then we're going to subtract the container, icon container frame size width. All right, looking good. So let's go ahead and hit Command B. We should be building. Everything is highlighted now. Beautiful. Let's go back to our view controller and actually use this cell and see what this guy looks like. So view controller, we want to register this cell dot identifier for this cell dot self. And then in our actual cell for row function here, we want to make sure we dequeue the proper cell. So we're going to use its identifier. We're going to make sure we cast it here as the proper cell. If we're not able to cast it, we're going to return a basic UI table view cell. This is going to become a guard. And then finally, this is going to become cell.configure with model. So I know that was quite a bit of code. We're going to run it and we're going to fix any issues together. So go ahead and run it and let's see what we get. All right, so kind of there. So we've got a container here. We've got the label. So the label is a little close. I would move that over a little bit. And the biggest issue right now is the icon is not centered. So let's go back and let's see what I did that's slightly weird. So first up, let's move over the label. So here we did 15. I'm going to call this 20 for the X and then respectively subtract 20 in the width. And let's take a look at the actual icon image view. So we go ahead and we're centering it with the basis of the container. But what's probably simpler instead of centering it that way is we could just say the icon container frame size width, which is actually the size variable up here. So we can do here is be lazy and say size minus the image size divided by 2. And that essentially will just set up the frame correctly from the defaults. Hopefully, let's go ahead and run it and double check. And we can remove that centering line. This will center it from the get-go as expected, looking good. I think the actual container is a little too rounded as well. So let's go ahead and decrease this radius here. I think Apple uses 8 by default. Let's go ahead and see what that looks like. All right, that looks good. So you can definitely move this inward so it's more lined up with the actual cell separator here. But what's a good thing to do sometimes is let's go into the settings app itself. Let's see if it's moved over. I believe Apple moves it over just a smidge. So they've got it right next to not the actual separator, but it seems like it's moved over a little bit more so. So we're going to go back here and we're going to do the exact same thing. So here, the icon container, we're going to go ahead and make the X of this, let's say 15. So that's going to be 15. Now we're going to have to update the label respectively. So here is 25. We're going to make 20. We're going to make it 25. And this is size, so that should be good. Let's run it. And let's take care of some more things. We're going to create sections now and talk about actually selecting and working with these cells. So like the settings app, we want to group these into actual sections. So what we're going to want to do is create another model here. And this model is going to represent a section, fairly simple. It's going to have its own title, and it's going to have options in it itself. And those options will be setting options. So now what we're going to do, instead of having the models be the setting options themselves, these are going to be sections, just like that. And let's go ahead and start creating more appropriate models here. So I'm going to start by just appending one at a time to these. So we're going to say, we're going to append a section with a title and options. And options is going to be an array of these guys. So the first one we're going to say is general. This is going to be, let's say, I don't know, Wi-Fi. The icon we can keep as house. The icon background color we can keep the same as well. Let's see what the problem is here. This should be with an S. And let's go ahead and copy and paste these a few times. Let's just go ahead and change this up. So let's say this is, I don't know, what else is in settings? Bluetooth, airplane, mode, and I don't know, iCloud. Let's change up these icons. I believe airplane hopefully is one of them. This one can be cloud. This one can be Bluetooth maybe. And let's change up the colors as well so they look cooler. That'll be that. This will be system green and system orange. And now that we have this one section here, we want to append more sections. So I'm just going to be lazy and copy and paste this for the time being and just change the section title. So this one's going to be information. And this last one here is going to be, let's say apps. So now how do we actually use these? So here we were saying models.count, which actually represents the number of sections now. So we're going to say number of sections, this one here, and here we're going to return models.count. Here we're going to return models, the given section, and then its options and its count. And then to get the actual model out, we're going to say from the index path, get the section, get options from that, and from that, get the actual row. And to actually figure out how to work with handling the taps on these cells, we're going to implement did select row at index path. First up, we're going to deselect with an animation at the index path so we don't have the row stay highlighted. We'll pull the model out, and we're just going to call its handler. And if you recall, the handler is just a closure. Let me just add a print statement in here. But you can, of course, do whatever action you want in there. I'm going to open up the console here. Let's go back to our simulator. And if you look at this, it's starting to look a lot more like the settings app now. So if we tap on the first one, we do get that print statement. The other ones we don't because we only have print in here. Now what we're still missing is the title for the controller itself. And we're also missing the section titles. So section titles are pretty simple. We're going to want to implement a function on the table view called title for section. I believe it's just called, it might be title for header. All right, so we've got title for header, section for section, section for section, that's not what we want. I believe it's title for header in section. So first we're gonna get the model out, which is gonna be the section itself, which will be models section, and then we can return model dot title. You might want to go ahead and call this section to be more appropriately named. Let's go ahead and hit Command R to build and run. You'll see that you get those titles now. All right, looking good. You can also see that it actually styles it for you. They're all capital, even though our models don't have capital titles. They're all uppercase, in other words. And as you scroll, you can see that like it basically starts to look like the settings app. So let's go ahead and embed this whole thing in the storyboard in a navigation controller. Now you can do this in code too, but just for the sake of time, we're going to select this here, come up to our toolbar and go to editor. There it is. And we want to come down to embed in. There it is. And we want to stick with a navigation controller. And we also want the title here to be large. So select the navigation bar up here, open up the attributes inspector, and check this box for prefers large titles. Now we already set the view controller title in the code. So if you run it now, you should have it by default. Looking good. Hit Command Shift A and you'll notice that it looks really nice in light mode and dark mode. And that's about it for these types of cells. Now we're gonna add the cell with a switch, and that'll be the last thing, and then we'll wrap up the video. So to add a cell with a switch is actually fairly simple. What we wanna go ahead and do is update our model to essentially hold different types of models. So here our option holds a setting option. So what we want to do is change this to be a setting option type. And we want to introduce an enum here. And this enum is going to hold different types. So we'll say like static, let's say static cells, and static is a keyword, switch cell, and each of these are going to have a respective model. So the first one is going to be this static model, rather settings option model. This is going to be a settings switch option. Let's go ahead and create this model here. And let's see, what do we want on here? On here, more or less, we want all the same stuff, but one additional property. So the additional property that we want on here is on, which is going to represent if the switch is on by default or not. And you might want to make this a var, so when you update the model, you can actually update it here as well. And if you just go ahead and hit Command B, you'll notice that I think it'll be breaking. Let's see. Yep, it definitely broke. And we're going to figure out why. Just a moment here. So here it's complaining that we need to go ahead and instead of appending these in a section, we need to append an enum case. So we're going to say static cell. And here we can just paste that in directly. So what I'm going to do is we're going to copy and paste this in front of all of these, just like that. And I believe that should be the proper syntax. Let's make sure we don't have any errors. Then we'll just copy and paste it below. All right, so these all look good now. Let me just go ahead and grab all of these. And we're just going to paste these down here, like so, like so. We're going to run this before we add the new cell type, just to make sure everything's still working. So now in the cell for row, what we want to do is we want to switch on the model, and this model is of type setting option type. And here we're going to say if it is a static cell, we get its model out as an associated value. And if it's a switch cell, we also get its model out. In this case, we're just going to return a basic cell because we haven't created that custom cell yet. And in this other case, in the other switch case here, we can just move all of that code and just copy and paste it, and everything should work as expected. So let's see, the problem here is a warning that we're not using this model, which we will in just a moment, so bear with me. And here, we also need to switch. So let's grab this whole switch statement. And in here, we can simply say model.handler, go ahead and call it. And we can do the exact same thing in here, model.handler. And here you might want to rename this to be type, just so the names models don't conflict. And you should not have any more errors. If you go ahead and run, everything should look exactly as it did before, except it's slightly refactored to now support another kind of cell. So let's go ahead and introduce a new kind of cell. So it's going to be very, very similar to this. I'm actually going to copy all the code in here. We're going to create a new file. Once again, it's going to be a TableView cell subclass, and we're going to go ahead and call this a switch TableView cell. Go ahead and continue. Paste everything in here, and let's rename stuff. So let's go ahead and call this switch TableView cell. Rename the identifier. If you think about it, what we now want in here is another subview for the actual switch itself. So we're going to say private let switch, and it needs to have an underscore because switch is a keyword. I guess you can actually just say my switch and make your life easy. And in here, we want to create a switch view similar to what we did for all the other subviews above. And you can set a tint color on it if you want. So my switch dot, I believe it's called is on tint color or something like that, on tint color. And we can make this a system blue. Now here we can go ahead, we don't want the little arrow thing. So here we're gonna say this is none. We wanna go ahead and add this to the content view, the switch itself. So we're gonna say add my switch. Now in the actual layout method here, we want to go ahead and make sure we actually lay out our switch as well. So we're going to say the my switch, we're going to call a size to fit on it, which will automatically resize it to fit. Then we're going to say content view, rather my switch.frame equals cgrect. Now this is going to be my switch.frame.size.width, my switch.frame.size.height. We're going to go ahead and throw these onto new lines. Here we're going to say this is going to be content view.frame.size.height minus the my switch's height divided by 2. That'll center it. This should be from the Y actually. This will center it vertically. And this is going to be content view frame size width, subtracting the width of the actual switch, and we're going to give it a 10-point buffer. Let's actually make that 20, and we'll reduce it if need be. And let's see, you want to say in here now, my switch.isOn is false in the reuse method. And finally, we want to configure this with the proper cell. So we're going to say this is a switch. I believe it's called a setting switch option. And here we can say my switch dot is on is model dot is on. And I believe those are all the changes that we need in our cell itself. We'll review this since I went through it fairly quickly. Now we can just go back to our cell and register it to our table, and we can actually use it. So jumping back to our view controller, and here we can now say, we can actually copy and paste it since we're going to be lazy. We're going to register the given cell for its type, and in cell for row, we want to use this cell. So actually here we can copy and paste too. We're going to copy all of this jazz. We're going to get rid of this, paste it here. And you just want to change the types for the cell. So we want to cast it as this, and we want to use its identifier. And your configure should automatically work since everything is named basically the same. So let's make sure it's first running, since before we add a model. You won't actually see it yet. But let's go ahead and add a new section up here, and we're gonna go ahead and call it I don't know, we'll call it something. We'll figure it out. So let's go ahead and paste this. We're gonna have only one cell in it, and this is going to be a switch cell. And this model is going to have another property. So let's go ahead and get rid of that. And let's take care of this. We've got a handler here. And we also want to supply the is on. So this is actually not the correct model. We want this to be the settings switch option. So let's get rid of all of this. This is going to be a settings switch option. Go ahead and open up the constructor. And let's go ahead and call this airplane mode, even though we have that down below. We'll say the icon is, once again, an airplane. We're going to say the background color is, let's go with system red. We want to go ahead and give this a closure to work with. Not going to do anything in here. And we're going to say is on by default is, let's go with true. Let's just see what that looks like. And that should be enough to get your cell to be rendering in that different state. So go ahead and create this, run it, and let's see what this looks like. All right, so we've got a new section here. We've got a cell. It looks very similar to these, but we have a switch in here now. So there's a couple of things that are weird about this switch. A, it's not positioned correctly. Well, not a couple of things, I guess the only thing. You can definitely, turn it on and off, and we can hook up a handler and a delegate to get the value out, but let's go ahead and fix up that framing. So let's go back to the cell and let's see what we screwed up. And by we, I mean myself. So the Y, we've got the height of the content view we're subtracting the width of the actual switch where there should have been the height. Let's go ahead and fix that. And let's see what it looks like now. All right, beautiful. So it's vertically centered. I think it's a decent amount from the right as well. You can reduce it if you'd like, but I think I'm pretty happy with it. And there you have it. That's how you can create a settings-like app. What I personally do a lot is every app generally that I build has some sort of like information or settings page. So it's always a good idea to create something that kind of looks first party. This is a much nicer table view than just like a plain vanilla one. Not only gives you nice icons, it's using system color, so it looks really nice in light mode and dark mode. You've got a switch option. What I also like to do is include a header or a footer that tells the user which version of the app that they're running. I've got a separate video teaching you guys how to pull the version out of your actual info plist, so take a look at that. And that's about it. So if you haven't destroyed the like button already, make sure to do so for the YouTube algorithm. Helps me make more videos for all of you, keeps it going, keeps the channel growing. Comment down below if you have any questions, if you have any video suggestions. Do you guys want to see more Swift UI? Do you want to see more advanced stuff? Do you want to see more design patterns? I love hearing what you guys want to see. So these videos are more relevant for all of you. At the end of the day, they are mostly for you guys. And I think for me, I get the most joy out of building things that are helpful for you all. So thanks for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next one.